One night, over 1,000 years ago, a young monk sweeping steps at a temple near the ocean looked down toward the shore and saw 8 figures standing at the waterline. They were not dressed like officials or travelers. They stood with the stillness of people long accustomed to discipline. There were no boats, no preparations. Finally, one of them spoke. "Tonight, we cross without a boat." This is the story of the 8 Immortals crossing the sea. Later generations came to know them as Ba Xian, or the 8 Immortals. In popular art, they became symbols, even decorations. But older tellings describe them as people who had once lived fully human lives. Through years of hardship, solitude, study, illness, service, and repeated failure, they refined breath, mind, and conduct until the boundary between human and immortal grew thin. Now, the young monk noticed Liu Dongbing first. He stood like a man who had settled his inner arguments long ago. When the wind tugged at his robe, he did not adjust it. His attention was already where it needed to be. Now, beside him stood Zhongli Quan, broad and enduring, built like a timber pillar. He held a feather fan that looked unremarkable, yet the mist around it hesitated, as if unsure whether it was permitted to pass. Li Tieguai arrived leaning on an iron crutch, clothing worn thin. But the scent that followed him was unmistakable. Herbal medicine reduced through long nights of boiling and patience. When he stepped, even the waves seemed to soften. The others formed a quiet arc. Han Xiangzi, with a flute resting in his hand as if it were part of his breathing. Cao Guojiu, whose calm suggested lessons learned near authority and paid for dearly. Lan Caihe, loose in posture, but unbound in spirit. Zhang Guolao, old yet unhurried, his donkey waiting as if it understood more than it showed. And He Xiangu, carrying a lotus with the quiet composure of someone who did not disturb what she passed through. Now, they were not performing, they were preparing. Each of us crosses using what we have cultivated, Liu Dongbing said. And he didn't say it as a challenge to others. He said it as a challenge to himself. Not by borrowing, not by hiding behind another's skill. If we have truly refined what we claim, it will hold us. Zhongli Quan nodded once. The sea before them looked unchanged. Yet the young monk felt the space widen, as if a boundary had been clearly drawn. In cultivation, what you cannot carry yourself does not endure. What you borrow dissolves when pressure arrives. Zhongli Quan stepped forward first. He lifted his fan and moved it once, deliberately. The air responded, smoothing the surface of the water into a narrow corridor. He walked onto it without haste. For a few breaths it held. Then the sea answered with a rising swell. Zhongli Quan did not force it back. He adjusted, waited, and stepped only when the wave had passed. The path returned. Li Tieguai followed. He set down his crutch, uncorked his gourd, and breathed into it. Vapor gathered, and the gourd lifted. When a wave struck sideways, his body swayed, but his center remained steady. He shifted weight the way one guides qi, not resisting force, but redirecting it. The sea found no opening in him. Han Xiangzi raised his flute and listened before playing. When the note came, it did not overpower the wind, it aligned with it. Fog rearranged itself. The water beneath his feet steadied only where the sound reached. He crossed step by step, each foot timed to the sea's own breath. Harmony, the monk realized, was not softness. It was precision without violence. Cao Guojiu placed his ceremonial tablets, hu, onto the water. They floated, uncertain. When a wave approached, he bent his knees and steadied himself, no longer relying on rank or appearance. He adjusted his balance and let the wave pass beneath him. He crossed quietly, his authority no longer coming from position, but from self-control. He Xiangu knelt at the edge, touched the lotus, and breathed out slowly. When she stepped onto the water, it did not surge. Waves rose elsewhere, but around her, the surface remained calm. She crossed without disturbance, leaving nothing behind to react against. Lan Caihe stepped onto a flower basket as if stepping into daily life. The sea tried to unseat the act with spray and motion, but Lan Caihe adjusted without fear of embarrassment. The water could not catch someone who refused to be bound by shame. Zhang Guolao rode his donkey straight into the sea, while he was sitting on it backwards. There was no explanation, no display, but watching it, the monk understood something. Cultivation does not always add power. Sometimes it dissolves the rules that power depends on. Zhang Guolao's crossing felt like a demonstration that time itself can be loosened, past and present made less rigid, when the mind stops demanding that the world conform. Liu Dongbing crossed last. He drew his sword and laid it flat upon the surface of the water, not floating like wood, but resting as if the sea itself were holding its edge. He did not ride it. Instead, he stepped forward and placed one foot lightly on the blade, keeping his weight suspended through his body rather than pressing downward. When the wind struck, the sword shivered and threatened to roll. Liu Dongbing did not tighten his muscles. He slowed his breath until it was almost imperceptible, as if the blade were responding to the stillness above it. He advanced one measured step at a time, the sword always gliding with him, always directly beneath his center, never moving ahead, never lagging behind. The monk understood that the sword was not carrying him across the sea. It was obeying his balance. What held Liu Dongbing above the water was not metal or sharpness, but a mind so settled that even the sea could not find a moment of distraction to exploit. As the final crossing neared its end, the water darkened. Something moved below the surface, vast and patient. In old tellings, this is where the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, Donghai Longwang, becomes aware, not in anger, but in response to imbalance. A wave surged, not blindly, but with intent, aimed at a moment of imbalance. In the old understandings, this was not cruelty, it was examination. The Dragon King was not an enemy to cultivators, but a guardian of order, tasked with testing those who moved through his domain without fear. He had watched their crossings with interest, weighed whether their power came from arrogance or refinement. When one immortal faltered, the pressure increased. The rule they had sworn hung between them, because the Dragon King's concern was not whether they would fall, but whether they would cling to principle without wisdom. Then, with a moment so small it barely registered, one of the immortals adjusted the current, like a physician pressing an acupuncture point to redirect the qi before damage occurred. It was not a rescue meant to steal the trial from another, but a precise correction, acknowledging the Dragon King's test while answering it with restraint and compassion. The wave passed. They reached the opposite shore without ceremony. Salt clung to their robes. The sea resumed its ordinary motion as if nothing remarkable had taken place. That, more than any spectacle, unsettled the monk. The world had allowed the crossing and then let it go. Before they departed, Liu Dongbing spoke once more. Each reveals their own ability. It later became a saying, 八仙过海，各显神通. 8 immortals cross the sea. Each reveals their own divine powers. But its deeper meaning is quieter. Each path of cultivation must fit the person who walks it. Borrowed methods collapse under real waves. What is refined in private is what holds in public, and true power does not need to humiliate the world to prove itself. To understand Chinese culture, we begin with stories like these, stories about cultivation, character, and crossing boundaries without borrowing another person's boat. Tell me in the comments below which immortal stood out to you the most, and check out our playlist about how each immortal actually gained immortality. And if you want more Chinese stories told this way, like, subscribe, and join the channel. And be sure to check out my other channel, Jared Tells Tales. Until next time, 再见! If you enjoy the deeper meaning behind Chinese culture, folklore, legends, and strange true stories, then come explore more with me on Jared Tells Tales, where mystery, meaning, and the otherworldly still live on. Click the link to watch your first tale.